The neutral sector was quiet, too quiet. Captain Solon, commander of the Threx Emergency Beacon Network, leaned back in his chair, the hum of the station's core resonating in his chest like a heartbeat. Outside the viewport, stars shimmered, indifferent to the lives spiraling around them. He liked quiet. He needed quiet. And yet, the silence that had greeted him this morning carried a peculiar weight, like the moment before a storm finally broke. A distress code had reached his terminal. Normally, these were directed, carefully coded and encrypted to ensure only Allied stations heard the call. This one, however, was different. Its metadata betrayed it. The message wasn't meant for Threx eyes at all. It was an ancient Terran signal, a legacy protocol buried in the forgotten archives of deep space communication. No one alive had used it in centuries. Solon's fingers hovered over the command console. His instinct screamed caution, but curiosity, a human trait, as dangerous as it was brilliant, pushed him onward. The signal was desperate, trembling across the void like a child calling into the dark. He could almost feel its fear, almost hear it weep. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, the words thick in his throat. "Who's sending this?" The console pinged again. A waveform blinked on the display, each pulse irregular, as though the sender's hand had trembled in terror while transmitting. The signature was alien, yes, but alarmingly sophisticated. It's a kind of intelligence that should have been in command, calculating outcomes and contingencies. Yet the message was raw, naked, chaotic. Solon's mind raced. The station's protocols demanded he forward the signal to the appropriate channels. Something whispered in his chest, a quiet human instinct, a sense of responsibility that went beyond orders. Someone needs help. Someone is out there and they think we're the answer. His finger moved. Not on the forward key, not on the automated relay. He opened the ancient Earth Comes protocol instead. Dusty, forgotten codes hummed beneath his touch, as if the system itself remembered the humans who had once danced along these frequencies. Solon routed the distress call toward Earth's old listening channels, toward the last known coordinates of humanity's scattered fleets. "Not protocol," he said aloud, almost apologetically. "But maybe someone should listen." For a long moment, nothing happened. The void swallowed the signal, and Solon's stomach clenched in anxiety. The transmission had been instantaneous, but its consequences, he could already feel, would stretch far beyond the neutral sector. Then the stars themselves seemed to react. A ripple of gravitational anomalies pulsed across nearby space. Small at first, subtle distortions that tugged at the station's sensors. Solon froze, hand hovering over the console. His mind raced through possibilities. Natural phenomena? Wormhole interference? No, nothing natural behaved with this. Deliberate irregularity. The station's AI, ever efficient, reported calmly. Unidentified mass influx detected. Multiple vessels emerging from hyperspace coordinates. Solon's stomach dropped. He leaned forward, eyes scanning the display. Silhouettes were forming, dozens, no, hundreds, across multiple vectors. And the energy signatures. Terran. Human. A surge of adrenaline mixed with disbelief. His heart hammered against his ribs. These weren't echoes of old fleets. These weren't relics of a forgotten war. They were alive. And they were coming, he whispered to himself, almost in awe. They came. The console blinked. Static. And then a name, one of the old fleet call signs, long-thought ceremonial, flashed across the main panel. Nightmare Fleet. Solon swallowed hard. The name had survived in records, whispered in fear and legend. Entire alien civilizations had feared this fleet centuries ago. And yet here it was, answering a call it wasn't supposed to receive. He looked out the viewport, seeing the first ships materialize, as if the universe itself had folded in on his station. Each hull was immense, bristling with weaponry, but refined, efficient, terrifyingly human. And yet, there was a rhythm to them, a discipline born of human stubbornness and willpower rather than alien cold logic. A silent shiver crawled down Solon's spine. Humans weren't perfect, he reminded himself. They were reckless, defiant, ingenious, and at times maddeningly moral in ways that defied strategy. And this was humanity's vengeance, patience, and promise, bundled into steel and plasma. The station shuddered under the gravitational eddies generated by the Nightmare Fleet's arrival. Solon gripped the armrests, fear and awe mixing into a strange cocktail of exhilaration and dread. His mind flashed to the aliens who had sent the SOS. Were they aware of what had answered? Of what the humans would do once the call reached the right ears? He didn't have time to dwell. The anomalies grew more erratic, tugging at the station's hull like invisible hands. He could feel the tension in the steel, the very atoms of the station straining under the unseen forces. And then he heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound on the comms not transmitted, but felt a resonance that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. A human whisper echoing across light years. "Hold fast. We've got you." Solon's breath caught. The words weren't meant for him, yet they were. They carried the weight of promises centuries old, of a species that never forgot its own, no matter how far it had wandered. He straightened in his chair, eyes hard, jaw clenched. This wasn't just a fleet. This was humanity itself, fangry, protective, unyielding. And he had just unleashed it into a galaxy that didn't yet understand what it had done. "Prepare for contact," he whispered. Outside, the stars themselves seemed to bend, light warping as human ingenuity and resolve arrived in force. The SOS had been a mistake, yes, but one the universe was about to regret. And somewhere, in the cold silence of space, a human fleet remembered a promise it had sworn before the stars themselves. The first silhouettes of the Nightmare Fleet shimmered into focus like phantoms emerging from the void. Captain Solon's fingers tightened around the console as he watched hulls, vast and gleaming, twist into formation with a precision that felt almost supernatural. They weren't just ships, they were statements. Testaments to human resolve, each one a promise etched into steel and plasma. For decades, records had labeled the Nightmare Fleet as a myth-a-tale to frighten alien children, warning whispered in dark corridors of space stations. Yet here they were, alive, responding to a signal that shouldn't have existed. Solon's heart beat faster with each new ship that emerged, the thrumming of the station underfoot echoing the rhythm of his pulse. "Captain," said Lieutenant Rill, his voice tight over the cum, "the grav anomalies are increasing exponentially. If they continue, structural integrity could fail within."
Oh.
His eyes, reflected in the viewport, were wide with fear and awe. Solon took a deep breath, could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. He had rerouted the signal, bypassing protocol, bending rules written for safety and order. Now he wasn't just a solitary observer. He was an unwitting conductor of a symphony that could destroy worlds. "Rill," he said slowly, "focus on stabilizing the station. Let the fleet handle what comes next. This is bigger than us, but Captain."
Hi there.
"They're human," Solon cut in sharply, the word heavy with both reverence and caution. "And when humans decide a promise matters, the universe itself better listen." Outside, alien vessels began to stir. They weren't massive mere reconnaissance craft, but they carried the arrogance of those who assumed the signal had gone unanswered. Their sensors, primitive compared to the Nightmare Fleet's centuries-honed technology, flickered in confusion. They didn't understand what they were seeing. One of the alien captains, a slender creature of reflective chitin, stared at the cum display and muttered a series of clicks and whistles, a language Solon didn't understand. But the tone carried unmistakable fear. Something had arrived that they couldn't predict, something they weren't ready for. And indeed they weren't. The Nightmare Fleet advanced not with the caution of a calculated strike, but with the inevitability of history itself. Ships maneuvered in patterns no alien mind could predict, weaving around gravitational eddies and anomalies as though space itself obeyed the human's unspoken command. Solon felt a shiver run down his spine. This wasn't just technology. This was willpower manifested. He leaned back, closing his eyes for a brief moment, and remembered the stories his father had told him. Tales of humanity's stubbornness, its refusal to bow even when the odds were insurmountable. The universe is not kind to weakness, but humans. Humans are relentless. Suddenly, a secondary alert flared on the console. Incoming subspace echoes. The SOS hadn't only reached the fleet. Somewhere in the quiet reaches of space, the original senders, the aliens who had crafted the distress, were watching. And now, they were terrified. Solon studied the display, were unarmed, fragile against the Nightmare Fleet's overwhelming presence. Yet the way they moved hastily, erratically hinted at desperation, not aggression. They hadn't expected the humans to answer. They hadn't expected anyone to answer at all. For a moment, Solon felt a pang of guilt. Humanity's response was terrifying, even merciless. These aliens hadn't asked for annihilation. They had merely sought aid. And yet, by their own recklessness, they had invoked a force beyond calculation. A flicker of doubt ran through Solon's mind. Did I just summon vengeance or salvation? The answer came in the subtle pulse of the fleet's movements. They weren't reckless. They weren't vengeful. They were executing a promise. Every ship, every weapon system, every calculated maneuver was the physical manifestation of a human ethic older than governments, older than empires. We answer those who call. Solon swallowed hard. He realized with both dread and awe that he was witnessing something ancient, something almost sacred. The humans had promised to protect their own, to honor the Collivan across centuries and light years. And now, by some improbable weave of fate and faith, he had become the intermediary. The first wave of alien craft shivered under the fleet's approach. They scattered, unable to anticipate the humans' synchronized aggression. Every move was precise, yet fluid like water cutting through stone. Slyn couldn't help but marvel at the choreography. These were not mere soldiers. These were humans in their purest form, adaptive, relentless, and unyielding. Then the anomaly sensors blared again. A massive gravitational fluctuation tore across the sector, forcing the station to tilt and strain. Solon gritted his teeth, but he couldn't look away. He felt. This was more than survival. This was artistry. This was human will sculpted into motion. He caught a glimpse of Lieutenant Rill's face, pale eyes wide. It's like they're alive, he whispered. They are alive, Solon said, voice low. And they're human. In the midst of the chaos, Solon felt a quiet presence, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. It was a pattern in the stars, a rhythm behind the fleet's precise execution, reassurance that the universe itself had not abandoned him. Not luck. Someone wanted this to happen. Someone wanted us to answer. The aliens scrambled, trying to flee, but there was no room. The Nightmare Fleet had anticipated every angle, every vector, every hesitation. Solon watched as the first of the alien ships, once proud and confident, was ripped from hyperspace by the fleet's calculated gravitational distortions. It disintegrated in a flash of light, a warning etched in brilliance. And still the fleet did not celebrate. There was no glee in the destruction, and only efficiency, only promise. Solon's chest tightened. He had unleashed horrors and hope in equal measure. The choice had been his, the consequence universal. But watching the fleet, he understood something primal. Humanity was not a species that forgot its word. Outside, stars seemed to dance in the wake of the approaching ships, light bending around the nightmare of human determination. And somewhere across the sector, the aliens began to understand the terrible weight of what had answered their cry. In the silence that followed the first contact, Solon exhaled slowly. He felt small, fragile, but also part of something vast, something bound by promise. Captain Solon could feel the station's hull groaning beneath the pull of gravitational distortions as the Nightmare Fleet took position. Outside, the alien vessels darted like frightened insects, their panic palpable even across the void. Solon's stomach churned, a gnawing mix of exhilaration and dread. Every instinct screamed that the humans' response was magnificent, but at what cost? Captain Lieutenant Rill's voice cut through the tense hum of the station. They're targeting the central comm arrays. If they breach those, we lose all control of the relays. The SOS could be corrupted. Solon's jaw tightened. The message that had started this chain of events, the call for help, was still traveling across space, vulnerable to interference. He thought of the aliens who had sent it, desperate, scared, completely unaware of the storm they had summoned. Let the fleet handle the chaos, he said quietly, though his hands were trembling over the console. Our job is to keep the beacon alive. Rill swallowed, eyes flicking to the viewport where the first real clashes had begun. The Nightmare Fleet didn't charge recklessly. They flowed, weaving between alien fire, anticipating and countering attacks with uncanny precision. Solon realized he was witnessing human ingenuity at its rawest, a kind of creative violence that felt more like choreography than combat. The alien sensors flared with confusion. They didn't understand the humans' tactics patterns that defied logic, almost poetic in execution. Human ship seemed to anticipate not just the enemy's movement, but their fear, their hesitation, even their panic. The flash on the display made Solon catch his breath. One of the larger alien vessels had been caught in a grav distortion and torn apart, debris spiraling across the sector like a comet shower. There was no celebration from the fleet on the Aniri calm efficiency, a fulfillment of a centuries-old promise. Yet, as awe and relief surged through Solon, a small, nagging thought clawed at him. What if we've gone too far? He thought of the alien engineers, their frantic clicks and chirps as they scrambled to evade the humans. They had made a mistake. Yes, but they hadn't asked for annihilation. And now, humanity was delivering judgment. The thought unsettled him. Rill noticed his hesitation. "Captain, are you questioning them?" Solon shook his head, though his heart remained heavy. Not questioning, observing, wondering if the line between aid and wrath has been crossed. A sudden alert jolted him upright. The aliens were attempting to deploy a last-ditch hyperspace escape. Dozens of vessels blinked toward exit coordinates, hoping to evade the fleet. "They won't make it," Solon muttered. His eyes widened as he watched the humans respond with uncanny timing. The fleet didn't chase blindly, they anticipated, outmaneuvered and sealed every exit. This was not mindless aggression. This was consequence. And then something extraordinary happened. One of the alien captains, sensing the hopelessness, ceased firing and broadcast a message in their metallic, glass-like language. A surrender. Solon felt a tug at his conscience. The Nightmare fleet didn't slow immediately. There was no ceremonial pause. Instead, the fleet adjusted its formation subtly, corralling the surrendering ships with the inevitability of tide against shore. Humans didn't need theatrics. They needed results. He remembered the SOS again, the trembling, desperate call. Humanity had answered. And yet, here he was, witnessing both salvation and the terrifying power of a species that kept its promises too well. A faint, almost imperceptible hum rippled through the station. Solon closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him. Something vast, patient, and ineffable was present in intelligence behind the order of events. Not luck. Someone intended this. Someone wanted the promise kept. Rill's voice interrupted softly. "Captain, we're receiving a secondary transmission. Unknown origin. It's silent, but intentional." Coordinates flashed on the display, ancient Terran charts, centuries old. The fleet's movement wasn't random. Something or someone was guiding all this. Solon's breath trembled. He felt the weight of responsibility. He hadn't called the fleet. It had merely been the catalyst. Then another alert. The aliens, cornered and desperate, activated an unknown energy pulse. It rippled through the sector, distorting space itself. "Brace," Solon shouted. The station rocked violently. Air vibrated, lights flickering, metal groaning. But through the chaos, Solon kept his eyes on the fleet. They adapted instantly. Not a single ship faltered. Every vessel compensated perfectly, moving with frightening instinct. Humans weren't just brilliant, they were unstoppable when answering a call. As the pulse dissipated, Solon exhaled shakily. Humanity wasn't perfect. They were reckless, defiant, empathetic, relentless. And when bound by promise, when answering a plea for help, it became something the universe itself respected and feared. Outside, the alien vessels now flashed surrender patterns. Not just in fear, but in awe. Solon whispered, breath trembling. "We're not done. This is only the beginning." The void outside the neutral sector station had become a theater of human inevitability. The Nightmare fleet, a constellation of nightmares in steel and plasma, flowed like liquid light across the dark canvas of space. Captain Solon watched through the viewport, jaw tight, heart a storm of awe and anxiety. He had called this into being not directly, but enough to set the universe's wheels spinning. And now the question gnawed at him. What have I unleashed? Lieutenant Rill's voice trembled over the com. "Captain, Central Alien Command is broadcasting again. There, pleading." Solon leaned forward. The alien transmission filled the station with a spectral chorus of sound and distortion. He couldn't understand the language, but the tone, raw, terrified, pleading, was universal. It carried the desperation of a species realizing too late that legends were real. "They thought we'd ignore the signal," Solon said, voice low. "They thought humanity was gone." Outside, the fleet approached the alien central command vessel. It was immense, a jagged silhouette bristling with energy emitters and shield pylons. Yet against the disciplined choreography of the humans, it seemed almost fragile, an overcomplicated puzzle with pieces that refused to stay in place. The first salvo of alien fire lanced toward the fleet. Plasma streaked across the void, lighting up the black-like streaks of molten gold. Solon braced as the station shuddered under the gravitational eddies induced by the fleet's evasive maneuvers. Every human ship twisted, dodged, compensated, perfect coordination born of instinct, memory, and relentless willpower. "They're not just responding," Rill whispered. "They're predicting." Solon's stomach twisted. Not luck, not technology alone. Humanity adapts, anticipates, survives. And yet, as the fleet pressed in, Solon's internal conflict deepened. These aliens hadn't meant to summon the humans. Their SOS was a mistake. Humanity's response, magnificent, terrifying, was absolute. He was witnessing judgment and salvation entwined. The fleet surrounded the command vessel like a net closing around prey. Solon's pulse quickened. The alien shields flared, systems overloaded. And then, just as the command vessel attempted a hyperspace jump, the Nightmare fleet cut it off. The humans didn't fire immediately. They didn't need to. Their formation alone was a Nepha living warning. "We are here. We heard the call. We decide what comes next." Inside the station, Solon's fingers tensed. "Do they understand what they've done?" Rill asked quietly. "They're seeing consequences," Solon replied. "And they're terrified." The fleet executed a maneuver so precise, it was almost beautiful. The alien vessel twisted, desperate, but the humans anticipated every vector. There was no malice in the inevitability. Humans didn't destroy for pleasure, they enforced promises. Solon felt a tremor of something deeper, almost divine, as he watched. Somewhere in the invisible threads of the cosmos, something guided this unfolding chain of events. Not coincidence, not chaos. A quiet, unseen intelligence, ensuring balance. Suddenly alarms blared. "Captain!" Rill shouted. Their energy correlates overloading. Solon's breath caught. If the alien flagship detonated, the shockwave would pulverize the entire sector. "Station, brace for," but before the words left his lips, the Nightmare fleet moved. Not to destroy, not to flee, but to save. Several human ships shifted, firing precise low-frequency stabilizing pulses. Their timing was impossibly perfect. Their coordination beyond machine, beyond strategy. The alien core stabilized. The explosion never came. Solon stared, stunned. Humans had saved their enemy, not out of mercy alone, but because destruction was not the promise they had come to fulfill. The aliens, once terrified, now trembled in dumbfounded awe. Their lights flickered in patterns of surrender, recognition, disbelief. "They didn't expect mercy," Rill murmured, voice soft with emotion. "They expected legends," Solon whispered. "And they got them." Outside, the command vessel drifted, helpless but alive. The fleet maintained formation, yielding, vigilant. Humanity had become something mythic, a force of judgment tempered with empathy, a nightmare only to those who broke faith, a salvation to those who called for help. Solon swallowed hard. He felt the presence again, vast, patient, almost divine, a hand guiding events, a whisper in the stars. This was meant to happen. The aliens now understood. Calling humanity was not a mistake. It was an awakening. And the universe would remember this day. The void had settled into an uneasy silence. The Nightmare fleet hovered around the alien command vessel, a constellation of human power that radiated both awe and terror. Captain Solon watched from the station's viewport, the weight of what he had triggered pressing on him like gravity itself. The aliens were subdued, yes, but the consequences of summoning humanity across centuries of space would ripple far beyond this sector. Lieutenant Rill's voice broke the silence. "Captain." Secondary transmissions indicate alien reinforcements are mobilizing. They're organizing. Solon's chest tightened. Of course they are. Realizing that the SOS was a mistake, and that humans don't forgive or forget. He felt the edge of panic nudge at him, the same fear he had felt when routing the message across ancient Terran channels. This was no longer observation. This was consequence. The station shuddered. Gravity sensors flared as ripples from the fleet's maneuvers brushed against surrounding space. Solon's mind raced. Every decision I make now could cost billions, or save them. Captain Reel said again, his voice sharper now. The alien command is attempting a multi-sector hyperspace scatter. Solon leaned forward, jaw tight. The aliens weren't fleeing blindly, they were trying to disperse the consequences of their mistake. But humans never waited, they acted. The fleet surged. Human ships split and wove in arcs that defied prediction. Solon watched with a mix of awe and dread. Every maneuver was perfect. Every counter perfect. Humans were not reacting, they were calculating, predicting alien fear, exploiting hesitation, turning panic into tactical advantage. This was humanity's brilliance, creativity in chaos, courage in uncertainty. Relentless will where others faltered. And yet even in the violence there was mercy. A human ship veered from formation to shield a disabled alien craft, taking a barrage of fire instead. Another intercepted a deadly energy surge aimed at an alien civilian transport. Rill's voice quivered. They're saving them, Captain. Even while fighting. Solon exhaled. That was humanity, terrifying, brilliant, moral, unpredictable. Suddenly, the station's sensors screamed. Subspace anomalized, massive, ones approaching fast. Captain Rill called. These aren't reinforcements. They're intelligent. They're observing us. Solon's stomach dropped. Not another enemy, but something worse. Witnesses. He watched the Nightmare Fleet respond instantly, rearranging formation in anticipation of unknown threats. Humans were meant for moments like these. They thrived in the impossible. Still, Solon felt something cold grip his heart. Did I gamble the galaxy on a promise? But the thought vanished as he saw the humans act with impossible bravery. One vessel executed an unplanned maneuver, intercepting a surge aimed directly at the alien flagship. Shields flared. Hull screamed, but they held. Rill whispered in awe. They stabilized it, Captain. They saved them again. Solon felt his breath shake. He saw humanity's truth. They didn't just punish, they protected, even those who feared them. The alien reinforcements, confident now, trembled. Their formations broke. Their weapons dimmed, because they had witnessed something they could not understand. Humans didn't destroy because they could. They acted because they must. With judgment. With empathy. With terrifying resolve. A massive gravitational fluctuation erupted near the sector's center.
Ow.
The aliens fired everything they had left. Human ships dodged, countered, predicted, and forgave. Solon felt that strange presence again. A patient, watching. Not luck, not coincidence. A quiet intelligence guiding events. Finally, the alien forces broke. Some fled, some surrendered. Many simply froze in awe. The Nightmare Fleet closed ranks around the command vessels. Not attacking, not finishing them, just containing them. Silent declaration. We are here. You heard your call. We decide what comes next. Solon's hands trembled on the console. The galaxy would remember today, the day humans answered, the day promises awakened legends, the day mercy and wrath moved as one. The neutral sector quivered under the presence of the Nightmare Fleet. Stars themselves seemed to bend around the hulking human vessels, warped by gravitational eddies and the raw, unyielding will of a species that never forgot its promises. Captain Solon watched the unfolding chaos from the command station, tension and awe coiling together in his chest like twin serpents. He had summoned this nightmare not directly yet undeniably, and now he faced the weight of that choice. Lieutenant Rill's voice came tight over the com. Captain, alien forces are regrouping near the outer vector. They're improvising tactics we haven't seen before. Solon's stomach clenched. Of course they were. The aliens had underestimated humans. They had assumed this was a mistake, a quirk of fate. Instead, humanity had arrived, a nightmare born of promise, ingenuity, and relentless courage. The alien fleet twisted into chaotic formations, desperate to evade the fleet's preternatural anticipation. Plasma streaked across the void, lighting up the darkness like molten rivers. But the nightmare fleet moved not with recklessness, but with precision. Every human vessel anticipated not just trajectory, but hesitation, fear, even the intent behind alien maneuvers. Solon felt a holy fear rise inside him. The humans were terrifying, yet humane. One ship diverged from formation to shield a crippled alien craft, taking fire in its place. Another disrupted a hostile energy surge aimed at a civilian transport, sacrificing position to preserve life. Rill spoke again, voice hushed with disbelief. They're not just fighting, they're calculating mercy. Solon exhaled slowly. That was humanity in its purest form, relentless in resolve, yet capable of empathy even in the heart of war. Suddenly alarms screamed. Massive gravitational anomalies bloomed across subspace. Rill's face paled. Captain, something big is coming. Something intelligent. Solon's throat tightened. He had feared reinforcements. Not this. Not something observing, calculating, studying humanity's answer. Massive vessel emerged, unlike any alien craft Solon had ever seen. Angular, possibly fast, emanating a presence that felt almost sentient. Brace for impact, Solon muttered. The new threat unleashed a barrage, and the nightmare fleet moved instantly, splitting, weaving, countering with breathtaking precision. Solon felt awe and dread in equal measure. Humans weren't perfect, they weren't invincible. But their courage, their adaptability, their ferocious will, it made them unstoppable. Still, human lives were at stake. The choice to respond to the SOS weighed heavily on Solon's conscience. Did I do the right thing? But the humans answered that question for him. One ship executed an unplanned maneuver, risky, brilliant, intercepting a surge of energy aimed at the alien flagship. Its shield sparked violently, but it held. Shh. Rill whispered, voice trembling. They saved them again. Captain, the enemy. Solon closed his eyes. Humanity didn't just destroy, they protected, they preserved, they answered. A subtle hum rippled through the station, the soft, uncanny presence Solon had felt before. Not chance. Not coincidence. A quiet intelligence guiding the impossible. The massive alien vessel prepared for a final, desperate gambit, charging a catastrophic pulse that could devastate the entire sector. But the fleet didn't flinch. Instead, humans advanced, fearless, isolating the threat without destroying it. Their judgment was terrible, their mercy even greater. Because even in war, humans refused needless destruction. The alien vessel faltered under the fleet's hold. Lights flickered, shields collapsed. Yet the humans didn't fire the killing blow. Solon felt something shift inside him. The aliens weren't witnessing destruction. They were witnessing principle. The vessel finally surrendered. The nightmare fleet did not gloat, did not celebrate. They simply held position, a silent declaration that humanity had heard the call. Humanity had answered. Rill exhaled sharply. They're alive. Captain. Solon nodded, voice tight with awe. Yes, alive. Because humans chose it. Beyond them, the stars shimmered, as if acknowledging the choice. Solon felt the quiet presence again, vast, ancient, not luck, not fate. Something deeper, guiding humanity's hand. And the aliens, shaken to their core, now understood. Calling the humans was not a mistake. It was an awakening. The sector was no longer a battlefield. It had become a crucible. Where stars once burned in calm indifference, now their light bent across gravitational scars carved by the nightmare fleet's maneuvers. Alien ships drifted in surrender or stunned silence, their weapons cold, their courage hollowed out. Yet no human vessel fired. No human pilot celebrated victory. Captain Solon felt the tension unspool inside him slowly, dangerously, like a cord stretched too tight for too long. Lieutenant Rill's voice broke the uneasy calm. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting movement at the edge of the neutral zone. It's coordinated. Solon frowned. Reinforcements? Rill swallowed. No, sir. Observers. Multiple species. There. Watching us? Solon's stomach clenched. witnesses, the worst thing possible, and yet inevitable. When humanity answered a call, the galaxy always watched because humans never acted halfway. They arrived with their full will, their full creativity, their full ferocity. And this time, it had changed the shape of the sector itself. Outside, the Nightmare Fleet drifted into a loose formation, like a constellation rearranging itself with purpose. Their presence distorted starlight, bent space, and forced alien vessels to recalibrate navigation just to remain stable. Solon felt himself shiver. They're preparing for judgment. Real's eyes widened. Judgment of what, sir? Of intention, Solon said quietly. Of the ones who sent the signal, and the ones who tried to manipulate the consequences. Suddenly, a ripple passed through subspace, deliberate, structured. Not an attack. Summon. The fleet responded instantly, aligning toward a point just outside the sector's core. Solon stared. A vessel emerged, silent and monolithic, larger than any alien ship, yet unmistakably human in design, ancient, primal, a ghost resurrected from forgotten history. Real whispered, breath-catching. That's impossible, Captain. That ship shouldn't exist. Solon felt his throat tighten. It shouldn't, he murmured. But humanity always keeps a few secrets. The vessel broadcast nothing. And everything. Pulse surged across the sector comm, commanding absolute. Aliens froze. Observing fleets halted. Even the nightmare ships adjusted formation like soldiers snapping to attention. Human will had spoken. Then, slowly, the ancient ship transmitted a single Paquita message so old its encryption predated most galactic civilizations. Real processed the signal, eyes widening as its meaning unfolded. Captain, the message says. He swallowed hard. We heard your call. We keep our promises. Stand down. Or stand judged. Solon closed his eyes. This was not war. This was doctrine. Humanity's creed made manifest. The alien vessels trembled. Some fled outright. Others powered down completely. A few transmitted frantic patterns of surrender, fear, or desperate pleading. Through it all, the Nightmare Fleet stood resolute, not attacking, not threatening, simply existing as the embodiment of consequence. But then something shifted. New signal emerged. Weak, trembling, frightened. The original SOS sender. Solon's heart dropped. It's them, he whispered. The ones who accidentally summoned us. Real looked shaken. They're alone. Their ship is dying. Solon stared at the console. Dort the coordinates to the fleet. Real hesitated. Captain, if we involve the fleet directly, we already crossed that line, Solon said. They asked for help. Humans don't ignore that. Before Real could respond, the Nightmare Fleet surged toward the source. Not with aggression, not with wrath, with purpose. To answer the promise. Moments later, the humans reached the distressed ship, a fragile, damaged vessel, barely holding together. Life signs were faint, power failing. The fleet encircled it gently, like guardians protecting a child. Solon felt a strange warmth wash through him. Presence he had felt more than once that day. Guiding. Watching, approving, the tiny alien craft flickered. Its lights dimmed, its hull buckled. Then a single human ship extended its shields around it, stabilizing its structure. Real whispered, voice trembling with emotion. They're saving them, even now. Solon nodded, eyes burning. That's humanity. Impossible, terrifying, overwhelming, and compassionate. The sector held its breath. Aliens watched. Observers recorded. The fleet shone like a constellation of judgment and mercy intertwined. Humanity had come, and the universe finally understood the truth when humans answered a call. They became legend. The alien rescue vessel, small, cracked, barely clinging to life, floated in the protective cradle of the Nightmare Fleet. Its hull flickered weakly, lights dimming like a dying heartbeat. Captain Solon watched the scene unfold through the station viewport, his own pulse echoing the fragile rhythm of the ship they had come to save. Lieutenant Real's voice came softly. Captain, I've initiated a low-frequency hail. Audio only. It's old, fractured. Solon leaned closer. Patch it through. A whisper filled the station. Not a language Solon understood, yet filled with unmistakable fear exhaustion, and desperate hope. The alien who had sent the SOS was alive. Barely. A lone survivor, calling across a universe that had already given up on them. Real glanced at the readings. Sir, environmental failure. Hull integrity collapsing. Without the fleet's shield projection, they'd already be dead. Solon felt a tremor in his core. Humanity had not come to punish these ones. They had come to answer. The Nightmare Fleet began rearranging, forming a protective shell around the ship. Space bent in strange, elegant patterns of choreography that defied reason and humbled physics. And then something even stranger happened. The ancient human vessel, the impossible ship from forgotten history, drifted forward, silent, immovable, gravitas radiating like a star. A beam of soft, structured energy extended from its hull, connecting gently to the dying alien vessel. Systems stabilized. Oxygen levels rose, hull fractures sealed. The alien ship began to glow, faintly alive, safe, sheltered. Rill whispered, awestruck. There. Healing them, Captain. Solon's voice trembled. Humans answer calls. Cries for war. Cries for help. Suddenly, the alien observers across the sector reacted panic, confusion, disbelief. Their transmissions spiked wildly, broadcasting fear and shock. This wasn't the humanity of their myths. This wasn't the vengeance they expected. This was something far more terrifying, compassion backed by unstoppable power. Then a new signal pulsed from the ancient human ship, calm, clear, resonant. A translation code automatically unfolded. The message echoed, "We heard you." Across the sector, silence fell. The aliens froze. The witnesses fell quiet. Even the Nightmare Fleet paused its motion. Rill swallowed. "Captain, did you hear that?" Sloan nodded slowly, every hair on his skin rising. The voice had not come from any human aboard the ancient ship. It was older, deeper, woven with a resonance that felt almost conscious, not machine, not AI, not commander. Something else. Something watching humanity's choices. Guiding them, walking beside them across the ages. The alien survivor responded weak, trembling. Another whisper, filled with gratitude and terror. The ancient human ship replied again. "You called," he answered. "You are under human protection now." Rill gasped. "That's an oath." Solon's voice broke in his throat. "Yes, and humans never break an oath." The alien fleets, those who had come to observe, to judge, or to exploit, now reeled in chaos. Their databases scrambled with fear-coded protocols. Their governments broadcast emergency directives. The galaxy had remembered something it had buried. Humans were not just unpredictable. They were unstoppable when bound by promise. The surviving alien vessel pulsed with new energy, stabilized, saved, alive, human. Ships surrounded it like guardians encircling a precious, fragile soul. The ancient vessel broadcast a final message: stand down or stand judged. The aliens obeyed, every ship, every species, every witness. None dared test the humans now. Solon felt the presence against oft, vast, patient, watching, approving, protecting. Humanity hadn't come to conquer. They had come because someone asked for help. And when humans answered, they became legend. The void of the neutral sector was quiet now, but the silence was heavy, pregnant with consequences, echoes of terror, and the subtle hum of human resolve. Captain Solon stood at the viewport, eyes tracing the still trembling alien vessels that had survived the Nightmare Fleet's inevitable judgment. Every ship, every pulse of energy, every calculated maneuver had been a testament to what humanity could do when answering a call across the vast emptiness of space. Lieutenant Rill's voice was hushed, reverent. "Captain, they're watching us, I think. I think they understand. They finally understand." Solon didn't turn to answer. He was watching the alien vessels emit faint patterns of light, almost like trembling words of acknowledgement. He thought of the SOS, the trembling, desperate cry that had sparked all this. Sand felt the weight of centuries compressed into this moment. Humanity had arrived. They had fulfilled a promise that was never theirs to make, yet impossible to ignore. "They'll carry this story," he murmured, "through sectors, through systems, across centuries. They'll remember the humans. Answer the call, always." Outside, the Nightmare Fleet held its formation. It was no longer just ships, it was a covenant rendered in steel, plasma, and the sheer force of human ingenuity. Not perfect, not infallible, but relentless, empathetic, courageous. Humanity had become the very embodiment of promise, the living reminder that cries for help were never met with silence. A flicker of movement caught his eye. One of the alien vessels shifted subtly, turning toward a distant star. Solon realized with a slow, dawning awe that they were leaving, but leaving changed. The panic, fear, and arrogance had been replaced with recognition, understanding, and respect. Humanity's arrival had reshaped their perception, their calculus of survival, and perhaps even their morality. His hand rested lightly on Solon's shoulder. "Captain, it's over. They're retreating." He nodded. But he didn't feel relief only, the profound weight of responsibility. This was victory, yes. But it was also a crucible of judgment, mercy, and promise. Humanity had answered, but in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy of something older, something enduring, that courage, ingenuity, and faith in others could shape destiny itself. Solon turned back to the viewport, gaze sweeping across the stars. Somewhere far beyond sight, the faintest shimmer of something vast and patient stirred, the subtle intelligence that had guided these events. Not luck, not coincidence, but quiet providence, threading the impossible through human action, ensuring that the promise had been fulfilled. The station hummed around him. He could hear the soft movements of the crew, the quiet communications, the gentle rhythm of survival. Life continued. Humanity had arrived, done what needed to be done, and yet remained capable of mercy, empathy, and ingenuity. He thought of the SOS one last time, the trembling plea that had reached human ears by accident, and yet had summoned something inevitable.
Oh no.
Solon felt a small smile tug at his lips. Even forgotten humans keep their promises. The Nightmare Fleet began to withdraw, folding back into the darkness of the sector like a tide returning to the ocean. Ships realigned, formations shifting seamlessly, leaving behind echoes of awe and fear, a warning and a lesson etched into the void. Rill spoke softly. "Captain, do you think they'll understand what we really are?" He turned to him, eyes reflecting both the stars and the human resolve that had carried them through impossible odds. "They'll understand that humans never forget, that we answer the call no matter the odds. It's that even when we are distant, forgotten, or underestimated, we arrive, always." A soft ripple passed through the station, subtle, almost imperceptible. It was not the station, not the fleet, not even the stars. It was something older, quieter, and vast. Solon didn't need words to understand. The universe itself seemed to nod, acknowledging that balance had been restored, that promises had been kept, and that humanity had reminded creation itself of the strength of will, courage, and empathy. Outside, the stars shimmered with renewed brilliance. Somewhere beyond light years and centuries, a signal had been heard, a story had been written, and the humans, relentless and brilliant as always, had answered. Captain Solon exhaled, voice low and awed. "We came, and we never forget." The station settled into quiet, but the echo remained an eternal reminder that humanity's will, ingenuity, and faith were forces that could not be ignored. Somewhere across the galaxy, a seed of respect, fear, and awe had been planted. And as the stars continued to shimmer, as the alien vessels carried back their new understanding, as the Nightmare Fleet receded into the shadows of space, one thing was certain. Humanity had arrived, legends had awakened, and promises were never